Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. We had news this morning with Nick Chubb agreeing to an expected contract restructuring. And since our last podcast, we also had Deshaun Watson talk about his shoulder and a hometown guy signed to help the special teams. And the news will keep coming with the start of the offseason program Monday and the draft in 2 weeks. Here to discuss, as always, is the suntanned Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Dave?
That's right, Scott. What's up? Hey, thanks for letting me have the week off last week. I appreciate that.
No sweat.
Yeah, hey, since last time we talked, I drove to Florida and back, watched a solar eclipse, and our new Go team has been unveiled on Channel 3 in the morning. So, yeah, not much going on for me, really.
Yeah, big week, big week.
Yeah, it really is. So excited about it. What'd you think of the eclipse? I thought it was pretty cool.
It was cool. Yeah, I got a kick out of that. We sat in the backyard for like an hour. Yeah, it was neat. And I'd heard a couple people who had seen them before just rave about it. And I think it lived up to it. I really enjoyed it.
I did too. I thought we were at Wade Oval Park on the east side, and we did a live hit that day we did a special eclipse special on Channel 3, and then leading into the Guardians. Hey, there you had the home opener as well since last time we talked. So Guardians off to a great start. But anyway, I thought it was really cool to be around a lot of people and hear their reaction. But then also I was getting texts and pictures from people all over the place kind of watching it. And I thought what was kind of cool, Scott, is pretty much in Northeast Ohio, you pretty much knew almost everyone was doing the same thing. Yeah. And I just felt like that was kind of cool. Like, you knew people here or there, and everyone, it was kind of, when I got home that day, you could still see people walking home, and people were just having cocktails and parties. And I thought that was kind of cool, man. Just a unique time. And like you said, I thought it lived up to it. The getting colder, and the lights, it gets dark, and I love the yellow and the orange sky, and just obviously looking at the eclipse itself, but just everything about it, man. It was super cool. Now, would I spend $1 million and drive or fly to California to see it? I don't know about that.
Right. No, I'm with you. I kind of feel the same. It was, you could see a couple planets, at least according to what I had read. One on the left and right, and that was neat. And then it did I read that it might freak out your animals, and our dog didn't like it. She ran inside when it got closer to the totality second, the totality part. So that was right. And we had birds going nuts. We sat outside, the birds were really chirping like crazy. So you could tell that something was going on in the world.
Yeah, I didn't experience the birds really. The pets, my buddy told me his dogs went crazy. They acted really weird, like even an hour before it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. I think the only bummer for me was, and I'm not sure what I was expecting, but I remember reading or hearing people talk about you'd see like all these stars, and we did see the planets. I was expecting to see a little bit more, I thought, behind it or around it. I guess it was cool. It was cool to see Jupiter and Venus or whatever it was during 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But that was the only letdown to me. I guess in my mind, I was expecting more there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I felt the same way. I don't know if maybe we had a little cloud cover or a cloud that blocked it, because I seemed like that might have happened. But yeah, I thought I might see more too. But overall, I liked it. I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, A+ for sure. But all right, so we're here to talk Browns as always, and breaking news here as we're taping the pod on Thursday morning. We have some Nick Chubb news, huh?
Yeah, which, as we sit here, I'm sure it's getting overshadowed across the country because O.J. Simpson just died. So, that's bigger news outside of Cleveland.
Wow.
But yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It should, like, within the last few minutes, it's all over X here. So 76 years old, cancer. Okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's 30 years ago with the Bronco chase and all that. So I'm sure you'll get a lot of O.J. Simpson talk on TV tonight and all throughout the day, right? I'm sure you'll talk about it in the morning. But yeah,
well, for sure.
yeah. But for the Browns, yeah. So Nick Chubb, like we expected this to happen, right? And Andrew Berry, the GM, had said multiple times, including right after the season, at the combine, at the league meetings, that they didn't want Nick Chubb's last carry with the Browns to be the one where he had the bad knee injury. So you expected this to get done, but it still had to get done, right? Nick Chubb could have said no, honor my contract. Now, he didn't have any leverage, and we've talked about this because he's coming off the knee surgeries. We don't know when he's going to be ready. The Browns still don't know when he's going to be ready. So it made sense that this was going to happen, but they worked out a restructuring. He can earn the money. They cut his salary so they can he can earn the money back through incentives. Now, I'm sure that's going to be hard depending on when he comes back, right? If he misses significant time, it's going to be harder to earn back the money and incentives, but that makes sense, right? Like if you miss 8 games, you probably shouldn't get the full salary, right? And that's part of it. And the Browns weren't going to absorb the $15.8 million salary cap hit, right? That was the biggest reason why they needed to restructure. And even if he were healthy, they might have tried to do it anyway, right? Because that's a big cap hit. But certainly, given the fact he's coming off the 2 knee surgeries, the Browns weren't going to live with the $15.8 million cap hit. So, at least I was able to confirm that they restructured the contract, right? He agreed to it. ESPN Jeremy Fowler says the cap hit drops to $6.275 million. So that saves the Browns, $9.5 million roughly under the cap. And they always knew that they would save money as part of their planning for the offseason. But that's a significant chunk, right? For a team that spends a lot, that's hanging around the salary cap. Saving $9+ million is important. You keep Chubb in the fold for 2024. You see how this year plays out. And then they'll have to figure out the long-term future after this. But it's good, right? I think there were some fans who had anxiety until it got done. And now it gets done, for 100%, Chubb's going to be here.
Yeah, the question mark will be, how will he recover, Scott, and how will he do? I mean, that only time will tell on that. But definitely, I think it's a smart move by the Browns, and I think it works out for both parties, don't you?
I do, and I think that's why I got done. And he wants to be here, and obviously they want him to be here. It's tricky because he's such a not only fan favorite, he's a favorite throughout the organization, right? Coaches rave about him, his work ethic, his dedication. His teammates look to him as a leader. So, there's a bunch of dynamics. You have the injury part. He's 28. You have the fact that running backs aren't getting paid, as much anymore. I mean, that's kind of the trend. So all those things play into how long he'll be with the Browns. This could be his last year. Like that, there's that potential. Having said all that, it's taken care of for this year, and now it's all about how does the rehab go. And Andrew Berry said last month that we'd start to know more in the next couple weeks, before the draft. He might have a better idea because Chubb's going to do more strenuous workouts, right? More agility work. But they really won't know probably until the end of the offseason when they expect him to be back. Is that week 1? Is that week 4? Like, where is it going to be? They'll have a better idea once he starts to do, they call it more load work, just because it's such a significant knee injury. And we all know that he had the same knee injury, or the same knee went through a significant injury while he was at Georgia. So there's a lot he's going to have to overcome.
Sure. And it's good for you because you guys have something in common. You each have a breakfast cereal. He's got Chubb Crunch and you have Petrak's Pebbles.
That's right. I always forget about that.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm here to remind you.
Yeah, thanks, bud.
All right. Well, if that wouldn't have happened, our lead story here would have been the news that the Browns will not be playing in Brazil. And that was yesterday's news. Not really a shock, right, Scott? I think maybe a couple weeks ago it would have been a tiny shock, but as the weeks were going on, and I think on our last pod, we both predicted that it would be the Packers, and that's what it is.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Chud. And I think the longer it went on, the longer you could connect the dots that it wasn't going to be the Browns, because they openly said how much they wanted to go to Brazil. and they're trying to expand, just like the league, right? You try to expand your reach. And the Browns reached a marketing deal where now, they're the team in Nigeria. And it's all about growing the game that's part of it, but growing the footprint of the NFL so you can make more money, right? And the Browns were all for that. They would have loved the exposure of going to Brazil, but the NFL decided it wanted Green Bay. And for whatever reason, Green Bay is really popular in Brazil. That's what the Packers president said. So I think Green Bay was a little more was more reluctant to go to Brazil, just listening to some interviews with the president, Mark Murphy. But I think the NFL said, hey, you're going to go, and they figured out whatever concessions needed to be made on both sides, that it was going to be Green Bay, and it was just a matter of figuring out those details. Where if it had been the Browns going, there wasn't a whole lot to work out, right? The Browns would have just gone without any negotiations necessary.
Yeah, I think it would have been cool, but at the same point, definitely would it. Who knows how that would affect the start to your season? All of that travel and starting on a Friday, and it's not routine, right? So
yeah.
You could look at it in both ways. Hey, it would have been cool, but maybe we don't really need all that jazz.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think organizationally, I understand why they would want to go. I think Kevin Stefanski seemed to be on board. He said he was. But that's a lot. The Browns are going to spend 9 days at the Greenbrier again. And then you come home, and then you leave for, a 12 or 14-hour flight, whatever it is, to Brazil. That's a lot. And not that they couldn't overcome it, right? It's early in the season, and you have your bye week and all that. So I don't think it would have been the end of the world. But I think it's just smoother not to go, right? I mean, if you ask many players, they'd probably say, yeah, we'd rather not go. It's not like they're going to spend a whole lot of time sightseeing in Brazil, I wouldn't think. So yeah, I think it just makes it simpler, no doubt. And then, still the Browns could wind up playing internationally. They're scheduled to play a road game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Jacksonville plays at least one game a year. I think it's one game this year, but they played multiple games in the past in London. So the Browns are a candidate to play in London against the Jaguars. That would be later in the season. You've done that before. It's less of the flight's shorter. You get to pick if you want your bye week right after the trip to, if they get picked to go to London. So that just seems less of a disruption than going to Brazil. And we won't know that until the schedule comes out later in the spring.
Yeah, it seems like though on social media, there's been a lot of talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes, the Browns haven't been in a while. The league likes to rotate. 2017 was the last time the Browns played an international game. They went and lost to Minnesota. It was during the winless season, right? Hugh Jackson was the coach. So that was the last time. So that's been 7 years now. It feels like they're due, but we'll have to wait and see if that actually happens.
Well, it seems like everyone's doing a podcast. I mean, we're doing one. Everywhere you go, there's a podcast. And Deshaun Watson does them as well. And he did one with Kevin Stefanski in town.
Yeah, it was
restaurant.
Yeah, it was last. I think it was a week ago. I mean, it was last week. I'm trying to think of this Monday or what day of the week it was. I think it was later in the week. Yeah, because the Final Four I think it was Thursday. Anyway, yeah, Deshaun Watson was opening he's invested in this restaurant. It's Lefty's, a cheesecake place in University Heights. And it was the opening, and fans came, and he taped his podcast with his personal quarterback coach, Quincy Avery. They do one, I think it's weekly or every couple of weeks, QB Unplugged. And they were doing it there outside the restaurant, and Kevin Stefanski came and was on it. He said he was going to be there. They asked him if he could go on. So they kept him on the podcast for a little bit. He talked quarterbacks. They showed him some plays, and he discussed it. And it was interesting. And I thought that, we'll talk about what Watson said, but I thought the interesting thing about Stefanski was being there is it's just support for his guys. And he's done it before. Myles Garrett had an art, he was part of a mural downtown he commissioned. And Kevin Stefanski came to the launch of that, or the unveiling of that. And I know the players appreciate that, right? Like, that's one way a coach can really show that it's not just about football, right? Is do stuff with these guys off the field, support them in their off the field endeavors. And he did it with Myles Garrett. He did it with Deshaun Watson. I'm sure there's other examples of it out there. And I know it meant something to Deshaun Watson. I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, that even before I could even bring it up, Kevin Stefanski said, yeah, hey, I'm going to go to that. And then Watson goes, okay, well, if you're going to be there, can you do this podcast? So I thought that was pretty I thought that was interesting, and I do think it has some significance.
Did you listen to the pod?
You know what? I haven't done it yet. I actually, it's weird, Chud. I've listened to plenty of the pods in the past, and I could hear bits and pieces because I was standing outside the tent. But there was other people, and you couldn't hear everything. And I went to listen to it the other day. I went for a run. I don't know if you can call it a run, but whatever I classify as a run. And I tried to get it on my phone, and for whatever reason, it wasn't showing up on my phone. Like, I couldn't get it to connect. I don't know if I was out of Wi-Fi range or whatever. So I've not listened to it yet, but I'm planning to. And I think there's some good stuff. You could hear from what I could hear, and you kind of watch the visuals. There's a lot about style of quarterback, I think, and catering to your quarterback, which is something, you know, we've talked about a billion times with Stefanski and Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. How about, I'm going to be honest, and you were searching for the day, and I was no help for you there because I was in Florida. I do know it was towards the end of the week. I remember seeing it pop up. I saw some of your tweets, Channel 3 and stuff like that. The only thing I really saw was a soundbite where it sounded like the cliche. We're taking it one day at a time, step by step. You know, I know that's what we aired on Channel 3 anyway. So I'm just being, you know, full just out there. I have not heard much of what he said. So I'm honestly not going to add a ton to this conversation. You were there. What did he have to say? Anything big? Was there a lot of value out of seeing Deshaun?
Yeah, I thought there were. I certainly did, especially, you know, these offseason, you know, like availabilities, I guess, with players. You never know if anything's going to come from it. And you know, you never know if there isn't going to be if there is even going to be football conversation. But Watson was willing to answer stuff about his shoulder. You know, he had started throwing in mid-March, so this was the first progress report that I had gotten, or I think we'd gotten as a media group. And you know, he said it was going well. He said the throwing is going well. He said what they had to do is be careful of not doing too much. Right? You want to rush it. You want to get better as fast as you can. You want to take that next step. And he said that's where, you know, they got to hold me back. So he's being careful in the rehab to not do too much too fast, but he feels good about it. He said unequivocally, I'll be ready for week 1, which, you know, you would expect him to say that, but, you know, you never know, right? I mean, and if he said, no, I'm not going to be ready, obviously that would be big news, but the Browns expect him to be ready. He reiterated that he expects to be ready. And he says that after he started throwing, which is a huge milestone, is the fact that he has thrown again, which he hadn't since, you know, November, the injury in November, and then the surgery in November. So I think that's newsworthy. He said that he expects to be better than he has been in week 1, right? Despite the shoulder surgery, despite, you know, he's not going to be 100% throughout the offseason program. That he expects when week 1 gets there, not only will he be ready, that he'll be better than he has been to start the season. And obviously, we won't know if that's true or not, but I think it's important that that's where his mindset is. He also touched upon some of the changes in the offseason, right? Many of which were made to better support Watson. And we talked about that, right? The need to do that with your franchise quarterback. So loves Jameis Winston. Winston came out and visited him in LA. They had a great time. Raves about Winston as a person. Ken Dorsey, the new coordinator, right? He went out and visited him. Since he was back in town, he said he spent time with Dorsey. They're starting to form this bond. He likes how they're doing that so far. And then Jerry Jeudy, right? He thinks Jerry Judy's going to add to this group of receivers. And he mentioned how Judy, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, all from South Florida. He said similar type guys, thinks he's going to fit in well, and he's excited about that. So, it's kind of a check-in with your quarterback before we get to the offseason program. I don't know when Watson will talk during the offseason program. It could be next week. Who knows? But I thought those were the significant things that were topics discussed. And, I thought it was better than I expected from that type of event.
Yeah. You answered most of my follow-up questions. Was Flacco ever brought up?
No, not with Watson. No.
Not with Watson, but I was going to ask you about Winston, so you talked about that.
Yep.
Man, just crazy though. You think about we're having to go in. We're in the off season to go into another season with the questions that we have, and with injuries, Watson and Chubb. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and and they're so huge, right? And we talk, Watson's bigger than Chubb, right? Even though as great as Chubb is, you can figure it out at running back, right? And the Browns figured it out at quarterback for the most part last year, right? Able to win 11 games, win with 4 different starting quarterbacks. So, I understand that that's the backdrop. But as you head into a new season, having your quarterback healthy and playing well is like the number one goal, right? Especially with Watson, with everything they gave up for him, all that, right? We all know the backstory. That's huge. And then, so you move on from quarterback is, hey, arguably your best player or second best, however you want to compare, rank him with Myles Garrett. Where's he? And you survived without him last year, but what a boost it would be to have Nick Chubb back, and back as the same Nick Chubb, right? That'd be huge, and you reflect on last year and all the things they overcome. And, when you get in the daily grind, I think you're like, oh yeah, yes, we knew they had all this adversity, but there's a game to play, but there's this, and not having Nick Chubb for the last 15 games. I mean, that's so huge. And for the Browns to overcome all that, right, speaks to how well they performed last year, how well Kevin Stefanski coached, all of that. And it means, hey, what a boost it would be if he were able to come back and be his former self.
Yeah. Real quick, they signed a former Glenville guy, huh?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I didn't want to forget about it. Justin Hardy Sr., Glenville guy, huge Browns fan. Went to the Ginn Academy, played for the Jets the last few years, was teammates with Joe Flacco. Excited to come home. Pro Bowl special teamer in 2022, I want to say, Chud. So that's an area the Browns were looking to get better at last year, and they did. They made strides, looking to take more steps this year. They lost Mike Ford. He signed with the Texans in free agency, and this feels like one of the replacements because Ford could play some corner, so can Hardy, but their main role is on special teams and, the gunner, the guys on the outside, the coverage guys. And, we'll see how, special teams will look different this year with the new kickoff rule. And I'm sure Justin Hardy, right, I would expect him to have a role on those type of, those coverage units, maybe in those return units. And we'll see if there's an even greater emphasis on special teams with the rule change.
So we always talk about how NFL schedule is now. It's yearly. So on the 16th next week, is that Tuesday, off-season workouts, and then we'll be able to talk with Stefanski and select players. April 18th, Andrew Berry's going to talk. Then you have the draft, April 25th through the 27th. Rookie mini camp, May 10th through the 12th. Then OTAs on the 22nd. OTAs on the 29th of May. June 3rd, golf tournament. June 5th, more OTAs. June 11th through the 13th, mandatory veteran mini camp. And then training camp is still to be determined. So the off-season schedule, that's the media schedule, which,
right.
Not everyone gets to see. So I thought I'd just throw that out there. So next Tuesday, Scott, right back at it.
Yeah, I need you to put that in my calendar, Chud, so I don't forget any of those dates.
Just record my voice and throw it in there.
Yeah, thanks. So they start the program Monday, and then our first availability is Tuesday. And that's guys back in the building, right? It's obviously voluntary, but I would expect, just Deshaun Watson to be there for most, if not all of it. Expect most of the players to be there for, most, if not all of it, in and out. I'm sure some guys will be in and out. Joe Bitonio hasn't gone a lot the last couple of years, just because, probably not necessary for him. And that was part of the whole, the NFLPA was trying to get guys to hold back a couple of years, and, maybe still, we'll see if it goes this year. He wasn't there for much of last year, and that might have been a shout out to his old buddy JC Treader, who's trying to get guys to scale back on the offseason program. But it gets guys back in the building. We got a bunch of changes on the offensive coaching staff, so it's time for those guys to get better acquainted. There's changes. There's going to be changes to the offensive system, significant changes, because you have a new coordinator, regardless of who calls plays. So all of it's important. And I know that coaches love it. Coaches love getting guys back in the building. I think players, depending on which one you're talking to, love being back around it, right? Some guys probably like it more than others, right? It kind of cuts short your off season a little bit, even though, again, it's voluntary. But yeah, it starts this run up to the season, and the run up to the end of minicamp, and then there's a break, and then it's training camp, and then it's full go. I think OTAs is 10 practices. We get to watch 3 or 4. Then we get to watch all of the minicamp in June. So this is, there's a break, right? I mean, the season ended in, I want to say January 13th was a playoff loss. Everybody leaves the next day, pretty much, unless you're in town to work, to rehab, like Nick Chubb would be. So that's a 3-month break where, for the most part, guys weren't in Berea, guys weren't around each other, guys weren't with the coaching staff, and that changes. And at least at some level, it's back to work and back to football.
So the draft, as I mentioned, 25th through the 27th of April. You want to just do we'll talk more about it here in the next week or two, but just maybe a quick thought on their biggest needs and what your thoughts are on what they need to do.
Yeah, I think with the state of the roster heading into free agency, and then the moves that they made, I don't feel like there's a glaring need, right? And I keep getting asked that by fans or whatever. What's their biggest need? I don't think there's a glaring need, and that's how you want to be going into the draft, right? You want to be able to draft. We hear it, it's cliche. Draft the best player available, and I think the Browns roster allows them to do that. Now they're also 54, so that's the first pick is number 54 in the second round. So they don't have control of a lot of the draft. So you kind of have to. You're at the mercy of who goes ahead of you. You have to be flexible in that way. But I think where the roster is, it allows them to be flexible, right? If they had a huge need at right tackle, let's say, then sometimes you feel forced to take the best right tackle, regardless if he's not the best guy on the board, regardless if 6 other tackles have gone early and the position has kind of been shorted. You feel pressure to do that. And I know the Browns don't want to feel that pressure regardless, but they certainly don't have to feel it with the state of the roster as it is now. So I think that's good for them. But if I had to list their needs right now, I would say probably need to add another receiver. I think you need to add a second tight end behind David Njoku, and maybe a running back. We talk about Nick Chubb, where he is. You could add a running back somewhere. I don't think at 54. And then in D tackle, I think you could add a D tackle. You don't need one, but you could add a young one, a difference maker. And then get younger on the offensive line, at the interior of the offensive line. But we're talking throughout the draft, right? But there's not a guy at number 54 you say they need to take a D tackle, they need to take a receiver, they need to take a tight end. Like, I think those are the 3 most likely positions at number 54, but I don't think there's any one of those is screaming you have to do that.
All right. Well, we're going to see how it plays out. But I guess the unfortunate thing is they just don't have a lot of picks, Scott. No. And that's something, this Watson trade definitely put them behind behind the 8 ball there. And we haven't really seen that pay off yet. So hopefully, we can get through this year and start getting some more quality picks here as the years go on. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, that hangs over this draft, right? It's 3rd straight without a first-round pick because of Deshaun Watson. It's tough to overcome that, and they did last year, right? They 11-6, and the roster's where it is. But I'm sure Andrew Berry can't wait for the day where he has a first round pick, whether or not he uses it or he trades it for trades it in some other way. At least you have that resource, and it's a valuable resource.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, well, that's all I got. Unless you have something else, I'm gonna go take a nap and get one more day in here. Friday, it's the weekend, and then we'll talk again next week because you're gonna have some stuff to talk about with the interviews and such.
Yeah, it'll be perfect. We'll reconvene next week. We'll have for sure the start of the offseason program. I expect Kevin Stefanski and players to talk. And then we get Andrew Berry later in the week. Now, we know how that goes, right? That he doesn't give up a whole lot in that pre-draft discussion, but I'm sure we'll press him on plenty of topics. There'll be something to talk about there too.
Man, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know if I enjoyed that vacation enough. I'm looking ahead. We probably won't have another week off the pod until June, huh?
Maybe we'll see if we can squeeze one in May for you, but it might not be till June, buddy. I'm going to Vegas in mid-June. You can pencil that one in now.
Oh, all right. Let me know so I can pencil in another vacay.
All right. Thanks, Chud.
All right. No problem.
All right. Appreciate it, bud. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.